Welcome to the regular meeting of the Fairfield Planning Commission for December 13th, 2017. May we please have the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Wesley. Commissioner Cohn. Commissioner Branch. Commissioner Pattis. Commissioner Walker. Commissioner McDonald. And Commissioner Geiger.
Here. Commissioner Wesley, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? There are speaker cards in the lobby area that must be filled out by anyone who would like to speak on an item under public comments or under scheduled matters. Speakers may address items on this agenda at the time each item is considered. Speakers will each be given 3 minutes to speak. Please give the card up to us before the time for public comments on the item. Next is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? A second? It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say yes. Next is approval of the minutes from the November 8th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? No. Do I have a motion to approve them? Second? All in favor?
And yes.
Two abstentions, yep. The rest. Okay. Now it's time for public comments. This is the time for the public to speak on items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Items from the public that are not part of the agenda will be taken under consideration by us and may be referred to staff. I'll now open the public comment period. Don't have any. You want to speak on public comment? That is a agendized item, so you can speak at that time. On public comment? Sure, go ahead.
There we go. Good evening. My name is George Gwynn. The DA's office had a Brown Act forum this Saturday. I wish some of you members had been there. The Brown Act says that people can speak without filling out a card, and I know most agencies require cards because it makes it easier for the clerk to keep track of things, but legally people get to speak without that. I hope that the next time there's a seminar, you guys are able to come. It was a very good seminar. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments? I'll now close the public comment period.
I just want to make one comment, if I can. Mr.
Sure.
First of all, the cards are meant just so that the staff can get the names of the people and get them correct when they put them in. But this Planning Commission, since I've been on it, has never turned down anybody to talk.
All right, thanks. The next item on the agenda is scheduled matters. For each agendized item, there will first be a presentation by city staff. I'll then ask the applicant to address the Planning Commission if they'd like. Then I'll open the public hearing and call out the names of members of the public who have filled out speaker cards to come forward to speak. A red light will flash to indicate that your 3-minute speaking time is up. I'll close the public hearing after all speakers have addressed the commission and after all our questions regarding the testimony have been answered. After the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will deliberate on the item and we may have additional questions of staff. We won't take additional testimony or questions from the audience after the public hearing is closed. The commission will then vote on the item. First item is item A, a request by Todd Bethke to develop an approximately 62,000 square foot industrial warehouse building at 2601 Maxwell Way. Our staff person is Amy Kreimeier.
Thank you, Chairperson and Commission members. Today I will be presenting on a development review application for Innova Cordelia on Maxwell Way. The project is located on one parcel located at the end of Maxwell Way. The 3.27 acre parcel is currently vacant. The project site is located within the Solano Business Park. It abuts the railroad here. The Solano Irrigation District holds a 20-foot wide easement that runs north to south along the eastern property line, and the Great Western Power Company holds a 50-foot wide easement that runs east to west along the northern property line. The zoning for the property is IL Limited Industrial, and the underlying general plan designation is IL Limited Industrial as well. The project proposes the construction of a new 61,739 square foot industrial warehouse building with office space on the 3.27 acre parcel, with associated landscaping and site improvements. Access to the warehouse will be taken from 2 driveways on Maxwell Way. The proposed development includes 67 parking spaces, 25% of which are compact. The proposed concrete tilt-up building will contain 53,246 square feet of warehouse space and 3 office spaces totaling 8,493 square feet. The project is proposing 2 driveways, here and here. One is new, and this one is existing, and is shared with the adjacent property through an existing access easement. The project also includes 6 vehicle loading spaces and 8 recessed truck docks. The truck loading areas are located on the east elevation, facing the interior side property line, and are recessed to adequately screened from view. There is an existing stormwater detention basin located in the southwest corner of the property that will remain. The building is a concrete tilt-up with panels 30 feet in height and with panels surrounding the proposed office spaces measuring 34 feet in height. The panels surrounding the northwest corner of the building will have a decorative stone veneer siding. The aluminum windows, metal canopies, decorative stone veneer, and landscape elements will provide visual relief from the expansive elevations. The zoning ordinance requires 34 parking spaces for the warehouse use and 34 parking spaces for the office use, for a total of 68 required stalls. 1 additional parking stall shall be required for this project as a condition of approval. 2 street trees will be required to be planted along Maxwell Way. Valley oak trees have been proposed within the parking lot landscape islands. Valley oaks are a large size of tree relative to the amount of space within these parking lot islands. As a condition of approval, the valley oaks shall be replaced with a flowering pear or a similar species. The project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Section 15332, infill development. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2017-21 and approve the development review as conditioned.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for staff?
Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of things. The neighbor that they're sharing the driveway with, that they're going to then have the trucks backing in and out of there, are they okay with this?
I have received, since this was written, a call from the neighboring property owner. There is currently an existing reciprocal access easement between the 2 properties for that driveway. They have reviewed, I sent them the plans to review, and I have not heard
Okay,
them again.
one other question. Is there any regulation citing how many of the parking spots can be compact versus regular?
25% is the maximum permitted within the zoning ordinance.
This has more than 25%, then it was 25 out of 67, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Say it again.
Isn't this 25 compact spots and 67 total?
25% of the 67 are compact.
Oh, okay, I thought it was 25.
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Walker?
So the Valley Oaks, what was the reason for taking the Valley Oaks out, my concern is that especially when things don't get landscaped or watered, that the Valley Oak is natural to take the dry and the wet season, and so it doesn't need a lot of maintenance.
The Valley Oak within the landscape islands has been conditioned to be removed. The landscape islands are small and the Valley Oak root system is very large for such a small area.
So it's a small, I couldn't see the island. Can you show that to me?
Yeah. And to be clear, they're not there now. They were a proposed species for that space. So it was a question of, is that too big
Oh, I see.
is it too big for a standard
I see.
parking lot island?
The Valley Oak needs to have ground underneath its
Yeah.
total
Yeah.
canopy. And
Typically, we love Valley Oaks, great species. Just a question, is it appropriate for a smaller?
said replace, that's why I was confused.
No, yeah.
Can you show me where the island is?
So the islands here, here,
Oh, I see.
here. There are additional Valley Oaks that have been proposed that are remaining along the exterior landscaped
It
areas.
just, when you say an island, I don't take that as an island. I take it where they put those circles like in the middle. And I was concerned that every time we do that, where these big trucks go, they get hit.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find this island. I wasn't thinking of these little inlets that you were talking about.
Peninsulas.
So- Peninsulas or whatever you want
Yes.
to call them.
Sometimes we
All
call
right, so
them
that
finger
makes perfect
islands.
Finger islands is what.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, it talks about the detention basin that's adjacent to the property. How is this building and construction going to affect, if any, that detention basin that's there?
Point it out, if you would, on the, yeah.
The stormwater detention basin. It's existing. The site will use that for their stormwater detention.
It has the capacity even with the water.
Yes, Public Works has reviewed these plans and has determined that it meets the requirements.
Okay, and then going back to the question regarding the driveway, I don't know if I quite heard your answer regarding the adjacent owner with the shared driveway. That was a concern I had as well.
So I did receive a call from them and I forwarded them the plans regarding the driveway. I have not heard back any additional comments from the property owner. The reciprocal access easement is currently existing.
And I assume
The
that
driveway that exists currently is shared lies over both parcels currently.
And do they use it for big rig trucks as well?
Yes,
Same type of use that this building's going to be used for?
yes.
Yeah, the site was set up to accommodate both of these projects together, and it was built with a common detention basin. It was envisioned that you'd have these two projects sharing that facility off of the courtyard, the court, Maxwell Court. So it was set up. It was designed purposefully for this.
Okay, thank you.
One more.
Commissioner Walker?
So the other thing on the retention basin is that I have a concern with is where we create these things, there's no maintenance of them. So when there starts to get garbage dumped and everything dumped in it, who's responsible for maintaining this retention basin?
James.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Good evening, Commissioners. James Pollock, Public Works Engineering. The detention basin out there, as Mr. Feinstein indicated, was sized as part of the Reconton project immediately adjacent to it. It was sized to accommodate both projects, and it is privately maintained by the property owners out there. The city does not maintain it.
And the city what?
The city does not maintain it. It's a privately owned facility.
What is our ability to get it cleaned up if it becomes a mess?
Yeah. So one of the things that is a condition of approval is that they enter into a maintenance agreement for this property, the developer. And so we do hold that over them. If it becomes a maintenance issue, the city has the ability to enforce that through the maintenance agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, is the applicant here, and would you like to address the commission? Nope, okay. I will open the public hearing. I have one speaker card for this, David Barron. Why don't you head over to that one? Thank you.
Okay, hello there. I'm David Barron. I own the property that is on the South Watney side of this project. We certainly welcome new buildings and property. Love to see the growth in Fairfield. But lately, they've been driving through South Watney, the commercial trucks, through the field to get to this property. And they also are going over your Solano Irrigation Department line that runs through the east side of this project. And we just don't want to have damage back there. They've driven over sprinkler valves in the past, and now it looks like we're getting a pretty defined road through the field to get to this project. So if there's any way, maybe we could try to work together with who's doing the project not to drive through that field for your SID reasons, for the landscape lines that run through the bordering of our property and this field that's owned by, what was it, PG&E, or who owns the field? Yeah, all this land right here. So here's your building. There's a power line right here. There's an easement.
Yes, so that would be it's with the Great Western Power Company.
Okay, so they're driving through there and accessing it from South Watney, and I'm here to ask if I get somebody's help for that not to happen.
So it sounds like you're describing some illegal behavior. We can take that information and we can work with you and police
Well,
and or public
It's
works to
whoever's building
identify
this
any
building.
solutions.
They're driving there for the building.
Okay, I'm
They're
sorry.
they're driving here. They're driving to this project
Okay. To the
through
project-
South Watney.
To the project that hasn't been approved yet?
Yeah, like someone's driving back there to keep looking at it, right? They're not spinning donuts in their truck. Someone's going over there parking or driving through. So it seems like that's what's going on. I wouldn't call it anything other than that, but I did want to bring it to your attention so that, it stops if it is regarding the building. Because then you got all your commercial trucks and you're going to get mud. And anyways, I'm just asking for a little help. That's the only reason. I knew this committee was being done tonight, so I showed up. So thank you very
Right,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other public comments on this matter? You've kind of already addressed the issue. Anything else to add? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation.
I'll move that we approve resolution 2017-21.
All in favor, say yes.
Yep.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
And you'll make sure that, David, that you address with the
Yes.
owner the issue that the gentleman brought up about
Yeah, and
some
he's
illegal
already
traffic.
been in touch with our public works staff here, so we'll make sure that that gets addressed. Thank you.
All right, our next item is item B, a request by Don Morrow to develop an about approximately 60,000 square foot interim parking lot for vehicle storage on a vacant lot at the end of Dittmer Road at 2601 Maxwell Way. Our staff person is Maylee Sheehan.
Good evening, Honorable Chair, those of you that are joining us this evening, and members of the Commission. My name is Maylee Sheehan, and I will be presenting this project, the interim use permit for a parking lot. Once I get it going. The subject site is a 2.72 acre parcel at the end of Dittmer Road. The surrounding properties are existing and anticipated industrial and office land uses. To the north, you have Interstate 80, and to the east, there is a vacant lot that was approved for a commercial office back in 2016 by the Community Development Department. To the south is another vacant lot for industrial, but there are also some industrial businesses such as UPS and Cordelia RV Service. And to the west is another vacant lot for industrial. That lot, in addition to this one, was approved by the Planning Commission April 27th, 2016 for a 100,000 square foot warehouse building. The subject site is currently vacant. The subject property is designated IL, limited industrial, in both a zoning ordinance and general plan. The site is consistent with these designations. Under the zoning ordinance, an interim use permit is required to allow certain uses which would otherwise not be allowed in a redevelopment area and specific area to operate for a limited amount of time until the site can be consolidated for redevelopment. So although the state has eliminated redevelopment, the land is still adopted within the Cordelia redevelopment area and is therefore eligible for an interim use permit. Furthermore, the code dictates that the Planning Commission can approve an interim use permit for a maximum period of 3 years with a one-time 2-year extension. As I had previously stated, this site, along with the western parcel, has been approved for a 100,000 square foot warehouse building by the Planning Commission in 2016. Approval of the interim use permit would grant the land use of vehicle storage on the site for an initial period of 3 years. Vehicle storage is an identified use that is permitted under the zoning ordinance interim use permit regulations. The proposed project scope includes graveling about half of the site, installing a 6-foot chain link fence with vinyl slats around the parking area, and installing a 20-foot by 70-foot asphalt driveway. As designed, the proposed driveway curb cut is in the same location and to the same specifications of that approved 2016 project. While the entitled project is currently being marketed for an intended user, this interim use permit would provide necessary improvements for that future development. In a sense, the curb cut, driveway, and gravel would actually help facilitate the future development of that project. In order to approve the interim use permit, there are several findings that must be made. This project does meet all of the required findings. First, it meets the zoning ordinance interim use permit regulations. It will not impede future development of the site. As I just stated, it should actually help facilitate the future development. Little improvements are required for the subject property as this is a temporary use. The project is compatible with the existing and anticipated land uses in the vicinity. It's consistent with the general plan and zoning ordinance. It is categorically exempt under CEQA. Adequate facilities, roads, utilities, city services are all provided. It will not create an overabundance or imbalance of similar uses, and it will not be a nuisance detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the city and surrounding area. Here is the site plan. As the project is fairly simple, so is the site plan. As you can see here, about half of the parcel will be gravelled and then screened by the 6-foot chain link fence with vinyl slats. The darker gray here is the 20 by 70-foot asphalt drive, and the curb cut would be right here, like I previously said, in the same location as the previously approved project and to the city detail as the other one was. So although the project is fairly straightforward, there are a few conditions that city staff is proposing as part of an approval. The site must be diligently maintained. Any trash or debris must be removed from the site on a daily basis as required. Any broken or missing vinyl slats would have to be replaced on a weekly basis as required. The use is only for vehicle storage purposes. Vehicle sales and maintenance would not be permitted. All truck loading must take place on the site itself. No loading would be allowed on Dittmer Road. And a surety deposit covering the total contract amount to remove the improvements shall be submitted to the Community Development Department prior to any building permit issuance. This would allow for the city to have a fallback if for whatever reason the applicant was not to remove the improvements after the permit expired. We would have this deposit amount to restore the site. This project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Section 15304, minor alterations to land, as this is a temporary land use. With that, staff recommends that the council, or commission, excuse me, adopt Resolution 2017-22, granting the approval of the interim use permit. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank
Any
you.
questions from commissioners? Commissioner Pattis?
I have several. Is there any regulation as to the condition of the cars or trucks that'll be stored there, so that's not junkers or something? I mean, I don't know, who's gonna be using this and what are they gonna be storing there?
Sure. There are no special conditions. Again, this is a short-term approval, so it's not intended to be a long-term thing. And after that period, the entire operation goes away. The applicant or representative is here and can talk to you about that if you have questions
Okay, and then,
about the type of vehicles.
And I would mention that the fence will screen whatever is stored on the site.
okay, and the other thing, we're saying that use of this will help improve the site in general. That's why, is it for the neighboring development next to it? I'm not quite sure what that means.
So the 2016 project for the 100,000 square foot warehouse building proposed a curb cut in the same location, and also the driveway and graveling. So if this permit were to be in place, then all of those items would be in place and ready for the future development whenever the property owner was ready to construct.
Yeah, and very often this is as the short-term project, it facilitates immediate turnaround, so that as that period is over, it's essentially turnkey with some of those improvements for the approved project to be constructed on that site.
Okay, I mean, it's short term, but it's still 5 years, or potentially 5 years. All right, thank you.
Other questions?
I have one, and it sort of centers around not just cars or trucks, but the limitations of what could be put there. I mean, could we have a vehicle with hazardous material? Could we have all kinds of other things? Do we restrict what could be put there? Not just whether it's a car or truck, but...
Right now, there are no specific conditions for that. If the commission would like for us to include something that states that no hazardous materials or vehicles holding such may be stored, that is something we can look at doing or something we can do.
I think we should. I think we should limit the use to what you would normally store. If you're storing a car, an RV, that type of thing. But I think we make it clear that it wouldn't be anything totally outside of what would normally be stored, literally in a parking lot.
And these are cars that are going to be sold at auction, is that right?
Yeah, and we'll have the applicants available, I believe, to give some clarity for you as to the types of vehicles that would be stored here for you to evaluate. So.
Excellent. One other question. I was just noticing where we provide communication and we normally go through the Daily Republic. So this is a question for all the things we look at. Is that our primary source of informing the public that there's a plan about to be presented to the council, like with this example?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways that projects get notified. So the first and foremost under the code is sending notice. The code requires that notice be sent to the property owners within 300 feet of the site. The city, by policy, notices 500 feet radius, so well more than the state law allows. We do publish in the paper and post on the site as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker?
The Ditmer Road, isn't that the original county road?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I really couldn't say exactly the long-term,
I
going
can
back
tell
in
you
the
that
history,
it's the original
but-
county road. So, I mean, it's not built to present standards that we would require of the road to be built on. So you have a lot of traffic that's going to go up and down that Ditmer Road more than what's there now. So I'm a little concerned about that, about the quality. And then I was wondering, you're talking about nothing being able to be loaded on Ditmer Road. Is Ditmer Road posted?
For vehicle loading?
Yes. Is it posted that says no truck parking or?
No, I think trucks do park out there, and as I recall, this is built to city standards, and it's a court. It's not a through street. I mean, it dead
Right,
ends.
but I think if I
at that
remember,
point.
I could be wrong, but if my memory tells me right, this road was built in the county.
probably many years ago.
So it's not to a city standard because the county didn't build the city standard in those
It's
days.
been improved, and
So I'm just concerned about the kind of traffic you have, and if you got big semi-trucks parked on both sides of this road, and then you got traffic going up and down the road, whether two vehicles can get up and down that road. I'm just concerned about that from looking at it. And my biggest concern is what the city looks like from the hundreds of thousands of people who drive up and down Interstate 80. Now, you said this fence is going to keep people from seeing it. Well, you've got Highway 12 that comes over an overpass right here and comes around. That's not going to block them from seeing it. So I'm a little concerned, the same thing I did when we looked at the building in the Solano Business Park, on what we look like to people when they drive by. So we're going to put up a chain link fence and a bunch of cars, and everybody driving down Interstate 80 coming in the city of Fairfield is going to see that. Has the staff at all addressed, maybe what our standards are for that corridor and what it's going to look like, so it doesn't look like a storage yard?
yeah, as a part of permanent improvements, definitely, and those are requirements. As a part of an interim improvement, we have the ability, if the commission so chooses, to allow for a short period of time those kinds of things to occur without going to the normal level of requirements that we would have for screening. Commission has a choice in what you require for this, but the provisions of the code are set up to facilitate short-term use of property that isn't expected to have a long-term impact.
What I would just think that it would be in the city and the staff's purview to, looking at the long term, at least require that landscaping and that you would normally require for when the building goes in, that it's done ahead of time, so at least we have some, that area coming down the freeway does not look good. It looks absolutely horrible as an entrance into the city, and I think that staff should take some concern about how the city looks for people who are entering it. And there's just a lot of people who come down that road, and we're talking about putting in a storage yard for cars with a chain link fence. So that's my concern.
Can you address for us how the future alignment of 680 affects this parcel, or whether it affects it, and whether Interstate 80 is going to be widened?
Yeah, I don't know if I have precise information, and without a map, I can generalize, but I can't guarantee that I can tell you exactly. But I do believe that there will be some widening of 680 in that immediate vicinity. Not 680, I'm sorry, of Interstate 80. 680, though, I believe that's 680, or that's Lopes on the right side. So 680 is just off to the right, quite a bit to the south of this image. Right now, the interchange of 680 and 80 is just up in the upper right corner. What's going to happen is that 680, that intersection or interchange with 80, is going to be completely relocated to the west over where Highway 12 is. And so 680 is going to be realigned just on the south edge of this image, sort of cutting at an angle across the lower end of this image, but not affecting this particular property. But long-term, you will see some widening of Interstate 80 up there, the upper edge of that property.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
It might behoove us sometime in the future if the Register Planning Commission, I saw this map a long time ago on how this is going to connect, and since we seem to be doing a lot of stuff out there, it might be educational if the rest of the commissioners agree to have them come in and at least show what the intent is out there in the future. I mean, they're going to have to buy a lot of properties to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can look to see if we have some
But
staff.
it's up to my fellow commissioners. I've seen it, and it's quite an impact. So it might be interesting if you guys are interested to see that, to see how it
Yeah.
maybe just as an informational item in the future.
I think that's a good idea. And we have a representative for the applicant here.
We do.
Familiar face.
Mr. Beavers.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Aaron Beavers here this evening on behalf of Mr. Morrow, who could not attend. I'll try to answer some of the questions that were raised on this. Again, as Maley stated, the site, the one parcel that this is going on is outlined in red. It actually only takes half the site, just about to the top of the cul-de-sac bulb here. So the actual parking lot area is going to be set back approximately 150 feet from the freeway. We specifically designed it not to put it out adjacent to the freeway where you just have a interim chain link fence doing the screening. We tried to keep it back off the freeway for this purpose. Again, the property owner that is requesting this currently operates what's known as the North Bay Auto Auction in the I-80 RV storage facility. Their main offices are located right here at 250 Dittmer Court. And then the large warehouse building here, which is just a little over 100,000 square feet, handles the actual auction activities. They have maintenance and service facilities within the building as well for all the vehicles, and then also have indoor vehicle storage, both for autos, RVs, boats, and so on. Access to the site is primarily off of Dittmer Court. There is a gated access that goes into the actual auction facility, separate driveway that comes into the public parking lot at the front of the office building. There's also access off of Auto Plaza Court. Ashley Furniture sets just to the north. This entire parking lot area through here, well over 8 acres of parking, is also just screened with chain link and vinyl slat fencing. There is permanent landscaping along the edges of that area, and that is ultimately what the owners plan on doing with this property. As stated approximately 18 months ago, the applicants came in, received Planning Commission approval for approximately 100,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility on this property. They have been marketing that through their broker, and if it's not sold by the end of this year, then they'll be coming back before you sometime in April requesting a 2-year time extension on that project approval to keep it going. They have had inquiries on it, just not the right one at this point. They also have an office building approved on this pad here, and that one they are looking at potentially starting on their own as a spec building here this coming year. As far as the vehicles that would be stored within this lot, they would be the same types of vehicles that are currently stored within the existing facility. These can range from automobiles, pickup trucks, small panel trucks, as well as empty tractor trailers. And that's one of the key issues that's triggering this right now. As stated, UPS sits right here at the corner of Dittmer and Cordelia Road, West Cordelia Road. UPS at this time of year, with all of us ordering all of our Christmas gifts through Amazon, bring in a ton of extra trailers. They're moving packages left and right through here. Additionally, just back to the south is the FedEx facility right across from Rodriguez High School. They have the same issue. They bring in more trucks than they can store on site. That's been an issue for Fairfield PD, especially out near the high school, where with the high school traffic, they don't want to have those empty trailers being parked along Fermi Drive. Same situation here along Dittmer Road. Dittmer does have some areas that are marked for loading, parking only, so that they can drop a trailer, switch out trailers and so on. Other areas are posted, as well as West Cordelia Road, for height restriction to try to keep the trailers from being parked out there. So you can have parking on the street, but not over 8 feet in height. Just about 3-4 months ago, FedEx came in, leased a large portion of this parking through here for their large trailers, and they have been currently storing their trailers on site there. That's created the demand for a little bit more storage on site. UPS has also requested the same option to try to have off-street parking, so that's why they're looking at this interim parking lot that could be used again during these holiday seasons. Now again, they may determine that it's more appropriate to park the trailers on these sites here, which are paved, versus on the gravel lot. So again, the owner would have the option of either parking the cars that he's running through the auction or those trailers on this site. He would have no objection to a condition trying to list that there'd be no hazardous materials, something like this. I think the key would be to say that all these vehicles must be valid licensed vehicles, so that you'd have current registration on the vehicles and so on. The primary vehicles being sold through the auctions are vehicles coming in from auto dealerships, vehicles that they're choosing not to resell on their dealership, but passing them on to this auction, which is a wholesale auction, not a public auction. So they're being wholesaled off to smaller dealerships. Additionally, a lot of these vehicles are also repossessions coming in from banks within the areas, from Travis, Wells Fargo, a number of different financing firms that again have repossessions. They auction those vehicles off through this auction as well. Auctions occur out on the property twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a constant movement of vehicles through this. As far as Dittmer Road, Gary, you're right. This used to be the Dittmer family road that used to go across before the freeway was there to go to the ranch. This road, though, was dedicated to the city and rebuilt as a city standard street. It's 40 feet curb to curb. It does meet our standard details, and as far as the amount of truck traffic that's already on it, between the auto auction, deliveries to Ashley Furniture, as well as the UPS facility, Whitecap, and some of these other industrial users, there's trucks up and down them all day long right now. The road that has the worst condition is actually West Cordelia, which is still a county road from this point on. And that's where you can really tell the difference between the city street and the county, because you don't have curb gutter.
So
any
you
of
can
that.
park semis on both sides and still 2 cars can go up and down the road.
Yeah, actually, over 24 foot of travel lane still there.
And what about the consideration about the landscaping along Interstate 80?
Again, at this point, the applicant prefer not to do that. They've agreed to it in the conditions of approval for the main project. There you would actually see, if we go back to those plans, we have a berm created out there with evergreen landscaping to screen, because we did have some bay doors facing that area as an interim use. And the reason the code was written on this is to allow for property owners to have ability to make income on a property with a minimal amount of improvements to it. The driveway, as was mentioned, is the exact driveway location that was part of the overall design for the main project. So again, as far as the property owner looking at, that's not a throwaway investment. He'll be able to recoup that when they develop the site. The chain link fencing with slats, again, is something that they'll put in, they'll remove at that time. The rock, again, depending upon the time frame, they could possibly be using that for their sub base for the new parking lots that would be within that area. But again, we were hoping that the existing slat, and by, as I said, holding it more than 150 feet off the freeway edge, that again, that would be sufficient, that you won't see it. I really don't feel, and just giving an honest opinion, as you drive Interstate 80, these vehicles here are not viewable from those areas. Right now, you've got the existing parking lot, Ashley and all, where you have vehicles parked here. This is just not noticeable. I don't really think that these will be here either, with that fence line running again approximately at that location, splitting through the site.
What's the long-term plan there? I mean, if this is just a Band-Aid for a fix on the congestion they have with the cars moving in and out and all the different trailers, at some point, that's going to have to be addressed at 3 years or 5 years down the road, where they can't use that parcel any longer. First question. Second question would be, is this the owner of the property seeking the use permit on an interim basis while the owner of the property continues to market the property? They're going to use it. They're not essentially petitioning this to grant it to others, right?
No, it is the same. Mr. Morrow, the applicant, is the owner of the property. He is the owner and operator of this business here. He will own and operate this, leasing out to these other uses. He currently has a lease on this property right here. This is actually, believe it or not, owned by UPS, and he's in discussions of developing this permanently for them to create that permanent parking. So this is, again, as I say, an interim use. Well, UPS hopefully could come in and create the permanent parking that would solve that problem out there. Because what's creating the need for him is, again, that he has FedEx and everybody in the auction area now taking up space, and he moves enough cars, and he doesn't want to keep, he won't lessen the number of cars that he's putting through the auction. That's the business. And just as a side note, this is, again, pretty clear and evident. Interstate 680, when it ties in at Highway 12, drops in, instead of being like 680 today where it comes in and you merge from the outside in, the new freeway drops into the center of Interstate 80 here in this dirt landing pad, and you'll merge from the inside out. So that's where the new freeway lands at that point. There will be ultimately takings across this entire frontage through here, and it was designed, when they did their permanent design, to allow for that taking. It literally will take out the first row of parking across the front of the Ashley store, as well as the Port Crochet on the old dealership next door.
Any other questions, Perry?
Yeah, did the applicant own this land for a while now, or did they just buy this for this development?
Mr. Morrow's had to own this for well over 10 years now. Yeah. He bought it from the original property owner that sold off the Ashley Furniture site when that was developed.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cohn?
Yeah, the proposed site that we're talking about, I haven't heard anything about lighting. What are you guys going to be doing for lighting out there?
They don't intend to do any specific lighting for this area. They feel with their security, they have full 24-hour security with cameras on the existing property. They feel that they'll be able to direct cameras over to that area. There is an existing street light on the cul-de-sac. They feel that they'll be able to cover that with their existing videos. And that's
So what about like unloading cars and stuff? None of that happens after dark?
No, and again, either the vehicles would be stored, either cars within this area, okay? None of those have the keys. They have the one point of access. If they're the empty trailers, the only trailers that go in there are empty. The backs of the trailer doors are left open on those UPS and FedEx trucks, so it's very clear and evident. There's nothing to steal, so there's no reason to go into that area. But they feel with their existing cameras that they have throughout that they can cover that area as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, it was good seeing you all.
You too. All right, I'll open the public hearing. I don't have any speaker cards on this item. Does anybody want to speak on this? No, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. There's a motion.
Did we want to have to do something?
He has to ask for a second first,
I'll second.
Is,
and then under the question.
so there's a motion and a second. I know earlier there was discussion of adding a condition.
Did that have to happen first? That's all.
Well, I mean, the motion and second has been made, so now under discussion, you can still do that, and then they can amend it if they want to. I have a question, though.
Okay.
Why we're, you know, my concern is this whole area is how well we've addressed it. I think it's a really bad planned area. I know it's not to put the blame on the present staff or whatever, but this thing has been so piecemealed over a period of time that the traffic is a mess. Lopes Road and Cordelia Road is a mess. We're adding more traffic through that process. The commuters that use these roads to try to bypass all the things. So I'm hoping that staff, that place is a mess. It just doesn't look good, and it's a major entrance to the city. I so much want to see the landscaping done, but I don't want to permit them not to use the property or to make it look better. But we don't know when Highway 80 is going to be expanded. We don't know when they're going to build this project. You know, I hate to see money spent to put it back, but I think staff needs to look at this area in a longer term and wider and what we're doing with this, because it is a major entrance to the city, and then I don't think it looks that well. And trying to get in and out of this place, any part of this place with the amount of traffic that's coming in, I don't know how some of those businesses, especially the furniture store, can, during certain hours, can even get in and out of there. It's a mess. So, I don't know, it just doesn't look good to me, so I hope we'll look at this a little bit more.
Let me ask you, Commissioner Cohn, does your motion include the condition that Commissioner Wesley had suggested that only licensed vehicles or registered vehicles be stored there?
Well, that's not actually my condition. My condition was to make sure there was no hazardous materials. And then the owner representative mentioned, well, that would be covered by making sure they were licensed and registered. I don't know that they would. So I would specify more about the hazardous aspect and eliminate that, unless we know that if it's registered, it's not hazardous.
Okay, I have no problem with that. I do have a question for you, Mr. Beavers. Because these cars are being sold at an auction, are they all registered or some of them not registered? I don't want to put a condition on there if some of these vehicles are not registered.
And I was thinking that even as I sat down. I know that 99% of them are. They don't leave the lot without being registered. They do the DMV registration as part of the sale.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say that some of them, when they come in, probably would have expired tags.
I'd hate to put a
potentially.
condition on something we don't have a condition on his main business across the street.
So it sounds like then if you're okay with the condition that no hazardous materials be stored in the
Yes, I'm
vehicles
fine
and
with that.
not deal with whether the vehicles are registered or not.
And we'd
That
be
should
happy
the
to say
motion.
that there's no dismantled vehicles or dismantling of vehicles, because they're not. These are all operable vehicles that are coming in, or empty trailers. They don't do any dismantling or anything, so we'd be happy to have that.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is the seconder okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
All right, good. All right, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
So we'll make those changes to the use permit.
Thank you. All right, our next item is item C, a request by Ninova Homes to develop a 1.73 acre site into 9 mixed commercial residential units and 16 residential units at the corner of Pittman Road and Link Road. Our staff person again is Maylee Sheehan.
Commissioner Geiger, real fast. Before we go through this presentation, can we have Mr. Feinstein address this correspondence that was left on our chairs? Sorry, I didn't catch you mid-bite.
I apologize. You grabbed me right at the moment I took a bite. I think addressing the substance of anything should come during the question and answer and public comment and after the presentation.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. My concern is for those that don't know, there's correspondence saying that people did not receive proper notice of this hearing tonight. And that's the part I'm concerned
What I
about.
can absolutely tell you is we have a list that identifies within 500 feet all of the registered owners of those properties with the tax assessor. Staff mailed notices to each one of those regarding this meeting. So, and I can vouch for that because I was a part of that process for that mailing. The item was also noticed in the paper and posted on site. So, yep.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So moving forward, this is the Astaire project. The project site is 1.73 acres, and it's located at the northeast corner of Pittman Road and Link Road. The surrounding uses are residential and commercial, although this existing site itself is vacant. The subject site is designated CC, Community Commercial, in both the zoning ordinance and general plan. It is consistent with both of these designations. A tentative subdivision map is required to subdivide the parcel for condominium purposes. The proposal intends to create 25 condominiums by subdividing the unit space in each proposed building. The tentative subdivision map as proposed does not conflict with any of the existing easements on site. As I've stated, the project consists of establishing 25 condominium units on 1.73 acres. 9 commercial residential units are plotted along Pittman Road, and 16 residential units are plotted on the interior drive aisles or roadways. Per the zoning ordinance regulations, 34 parking spaces are required, and 64 spaces have been provided. I'll talk about the breakdown of that in a little bit. There is one access point to the site off of Link Road. It should be noted that the proposed entrance gate is not supported by staff, and the project is conditioned to not have an entrance gate. The project also entails ample landscaping and necessary associated site improvements. The condominium units are just...
Could you please explain that again about the gate?
So the project has one access point off of Link Road. It's
Right.
currently proposed as a gated entrance.
Right.
Staff does not support a gated entrance, so we have conditioned it to not have any gated access.
Can staff explain why?
Because this is a commercial project, we wanted to ensure that all of the commercial parking spaces are freely accessible. We didn't want to complicate it with access codes.
Yeah, and the parking is shared with the residential. It's a mixed residential and commercial parking space, and we typically do not see gates for commercial
So
parking
why can't it be
spaces.
a situation where the gate is open during business hours and closed at night?
It requires monitoring. You know, it's just one more issue that raises a question of is it potentially going to have impacts? So the commission can evaluate this question as you deliberate on it, but there's your reason.
The condominium units are dispersed throughout the site in clusters. There's an assortment of building unit makeups from 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 plexes. Each building has 2 floor plans that range from 1,309 square feet to 1,351 square feet. Both floor plans include a garage on the first floor, living and kitchen on the second floor, and bedrooms on the third. The 16 residential units have tandem garage parking, and the 9 commercial residential units have a 1-car garage and then the commercial space. An average of 150 square feet of commercial space is proposed per unit. All of the proposed buildings are approximately 30 feet 34 feet in height, which is well below the permitted 45-foot height. Per the zoning ordinance, residential units may be conditionally permitted in conjunction with a commercial project on the same property. In order to approve a conditional use permit, the project must comply with the zoning ordinance's mixed use regulations. The regulations include criteria on density and intensity. A maximum 32 units per acre is permitted. The proposed project has 12.6 units. A maximum floor area ratio permitted is 0.85. The project's floor area ratio is 0.68. Additionally, the regulations state that no more than 50% of the ground floor space may be residential in buildings that front a public street. This would include the 2 buildings that are fronting Pittman Road. In those buildings, the ground floor is all commercial. All of the other buildings on site do not front a public street. They actually front an interior open space, and they back onto private roads or interior roadways. The project also must provide 200 square feet of open space per residential unit. A total of 5,000 square feet is required. 9,000 square feet has been provided. 1 parking space per residential unit is required, and 1 space per 200 square feet of commercial space is required. This calculates out to 25 spaces per the residential portion of the project, and 9 spaces for the commercial portion of the project. So although the average commercial space is about 150, staff, when calculating the parking, rounded up to the nearest whole number for the required parking, which gives you a more conservative space of 9 spaces. So therefore, a total of 34 spaces are required. 64 spaces have been provided. There are 41 garage spaces and 23 surface parking stalls. Here's a site plan that kind of brings all that description together. So you have Pittman Road right here, and then Link Road that comes around the bottom. The 2 buildings fronting Pittman Road is a 5-plex and a 4-plex that all have the commercial units on the ground floor. The remaining 3, 6, and 7-plex all front this interior open space area, and they back onto these interior roadways or drive aisles. Here is where you see that proposed entrance gate that staff is not currently supporting. Excuse me. And faintly you can kind of see here that there are easements coming across their PG&E gas line, and there's another electric line coming here. The applicant has had a lot of communications with PG&E. I'll let him discuss that if you guys have questions, but I have received confirmation that they are comfortable with this project. Here is a rendering of what the Pittman Road streetscape would look like. You have that 5-plex and 4-plex with the commercial on the bottom. This is just kind of a larger image of that. I'm sorry the lines are not coming in as strongly. I just wanted to point out where potential sign locations would be permitted for the commercial units. Here is the 6-plex. It's a residential building. Just to give you an idea, that front facade is what opens up to the common open space area, and the rear elevation is what backs onto the interior driveway. That rear elevation is what would be visible from Link Road. And then again, just overlapping the site plan. So we were looking at this 6-plex here. The front comes to the open space, the back onto this street. I believe that's B. Sorry, I don't have my glasses.
I have a question for you while you're on this particular page. Where it says back, those are commercial units there.
No, so the only commercial units
on there.
are along Pittman Road because those are the units that front a public street.
So with that understanding, because we're so close to residential, are we making sure in the sign ordinance that we're not having any blinking, flashing, turning signs?
Yeah, that's a specific requirement of the sign ordinance. The faces where those signs would be actually face away from the residences, faces over towards commercial area, but the code itself mandates that to begin with.
I'm just concerned also what might come on the other side that you know, you don't have these flashing and blinking
Yes,
lights. and stuff.
code mandates no flashing, blinking. Yep.
Here I just have another slide of the building elevations because I wanted to highlight that there are two facade application designs that add a little variation and interest to the project. You can see that the project breaks up the three-story massing with a variety of colors, siding materials, accent elements such as cement paneling, lap siding, stone veneer, metal awnings and railings, and fiberglass doors. Additionally, the elevations provide more than one plane to add articulation and movement to the buildings with the windows, balconies, pop-out elements, and inset entrances. Here is a look at the left and right elevations for the proposed buildings. To ensure that all of the elevations, not just the front facade, have the same element of architectural detail, the staff has conditioned that the project provide additional enhancements on the side and rear elevations that face the public street or that are visible from the public street. Here is a floor plan of the non-residential buildings that have the commercial unit on the first floor. Here would be the one-car garage, and you've got space for your toters. The front portion is your office space with bathroom. The second floor is the kitchen and living area, and the third floor has the bedrooms. There's an option for 2 bedrooms. The residential buildings have a tandem garage, and then similarly, a kitchen and living area, and then the bedrooms on the third floor. A conceptual landscape plan was submitted depicting street trees and accent trees along Pittman Road and Link Road, as well as throughout the site. Although the conceptual plan only shows the outline of the trees, there was an associated plant palette that outlined a variety of ground cover and shrub species as well. To meet city standards, the project has been conditioned to provide more street trees along Link Road. The standard is 1 tree per every 30 feet of street frontage, which we have included into the conditions of approval. Where the existing PG&E easement doesn't allow for tree planting, we have conditioned that a minimum 3-foot mound be prepared, installed, including ground cover and shrubs to add a little more topography and visual aesthetics to the site at that corner. The proposed landscape plan does meet the required interior property line setback of 5 feet, so at these interior lines here. And it also meets the 15-foot landscape setback along Pittman Road. However, the conceptual drawings provided do not definitively confirm that the required landscaping is met along Link Road. Therefore, staff has conditioned to ensure the final development meets that landscape depth of 15 feet along Link Road. In compliance with city and state standards, 5 storm water quality areas or treatment areas have been incorporated throughout the site. They provide enough square footage to serve, retain, and treat the storm water. Lastly, as I detailed earlier, there is 9,000 square feet of open space in the center of the project here. This is kind of more of a summary of the items I've gone over. These are all things we've addressed, and they are all conditions that staff is proposing. We are proposing that the access gates are not approved or are not permitted. We are proposing that the side and rear elevations of the buildings be enhanced from any visible public street. 1 street tree must be provided every 30 feet of street frontage. A mound needs to be created where the easements prohibit planting of trees. And a minimum 15-foot landscape depth must be provided on Link Road. Per the California Environmental Quality Act, this project falls under Section 15332 as an infill project and is exempt. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2017-23, granting approval of the tentative subdivision map, development review, and use permit. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to help address them, and thank you.
Any questions of staff? Commissioner Walker?
So the project is totally fenced?
Totally fenced, I'm
Yes.
sorry. So it does have fencing on the north side here, east, and currently they have a fencing proposed along Link. I'm not sure when the applicant looks back at ensuring that 15-foot landscape depth, if it's going to remain or not. And there is no fencing along Pittman Road. The commercial units are accessible by pedestrians off of Pittman.
The high end up there in the top left-hand, is that fenced or is that an open road?
I actually do believe that there's some
Wall,
fencing
I
up
believe-
here.
I believe is what's proposed, correct?
Yeah, I should say wall, excuse me.
It's a
Yeah.
masonry wall.
And then is there a gate in between the units where the walkway is on Pittman?
On Pittman, so are you speaking about between the buildings
Yes.
right here?
Yes.
I'd have to examine the plans again. I'm sorry, I don't recall. Yes, it's not, the applicant is telling me there is
So
fencing.
my concern is, in the project, is having it totally fenced is for security reasons, being that it's in such an open, right off the freeway area. So that the total project should be fenced in. As far as the gate is concerned, you know, I think if I was to live there, that I'd want that there. But the concern I have is that if staff is opposed to it and doesn't want to have it, what I'd like to make sure that's in place here, if this gets approved, what's in place here is if the tenants in the future find that there's an issue, that they have the ability, that this does not stop them from putting it, but they have the ability to come back in and propose to put a gate there.
Yes, they do have that.
So
They do have that
this
ability.
not having it there is not a roadblock for them coming back in, you're saying to me?
Correct.
And we'll
Essentially-
put that in the process.
Yep.
The other question I have for staff is, what else, let's say we don't even see this project right now. What else can be located here on this, under the zoning? Give me some
Sure.
examples.
Yeah, it's a wide range of commercial zoning. You could have retail, a wide range of retail and office kinds of uses.
Fast food?
This is community commercial?
Community
Yes,
commercial.
fast food is a potential use on this site. Yeah, and you have a number of fast food users in this area.
Right.
So yes, it is.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Other questions? Commissioner Pattis?
Yeah, so with the commercial, so is this, I'm assuming based on the layout here, that you expect the people who are running their little office downstairs live above it? I mean, it's not as separate.
Yeah, as the buildings are currently proposed, it would be assumed that the ground floor is the same owner as the above residential
Okay.
areas.
So it's
It's
just
what-
got to be like a lawyer or something? I mean,
Yeah,
a
it
very
could be a
small little
lawyer, yeah, a
office area.
hairdresser. Yeah, it's what we would consider to be live work. And there's a project similar to this over in Sassoon, down in their downtown. But it's a product type that I don't believe we have anything like this in the city. So it'd be unique, new product type. So if you're a small proprietor of a business, you've got a space that allows that. And the important thing is, if you're a proprietor of a business like that, like a hairdresser, and you want to have that in your house today, under our code in most residentials, in fact, in all residential zones, there's a limit on the number of customers that you can come to your house because it's intended primarily as a residential setting in a neighborhood. In this case, it's got a commercial zoning right now. It's expected that you're having customers coming to this site under our current zoning. So by having this live work as a part of a commercial site, you don't have the limits on the number of customers. So it's typical to any other commercial site. So it adds flexibility if you buy that compared to any other residence in the city.
Okay. I've got several more questions, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have one.
Well, let
I'm not
Perry
done.
finish.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you.
We'll
So
go
one of
down
the
the
first
line.
things it says in the write-up to us was that they had gone through, I thought, met with a lot of the neighbors and gone through a lot of iterations and changes. Can you
Yeah,
explain
so,
some of the changes that were made based on making the neighbors happy?
sure. Earlier in the year, DeNova had another project with the city of Fairfield. It was called Chantilly, and it was a residential project further down Pittman Road. Once we had received both of the projects, we had asked them to hold a community meeting. They had that meeting sometime in April in which the community expressed their concerns. Following that meeting, this particular project, which at the time was a purely residential project of 30-ish, sorry, I don't know the exact amount of units, 30 or so units proposed. That application was then withdrawn, and then when it was resubmitted, it was maybe about a high 20s. So as we kept working the project, kind of smoothing out the kinks, the units dropped down. So you started with a 30 or so purely residential product until you reached this 25 mixed-use commercial project.
And one of the key differences with that original application for this site, in addition to a change in the number of units, is that that original application was not allowable under the existing commercial zoning. It would have required an amendment to the general plan and to the zoning, very discretionary on the part of the city in terms of just is that an appropriate project for this site. By adding the mixed component to this and ensuring that there is a commercial component, it makes it something that does not require the general plan or zoning amendment, and it is a simpler process for the city to consider. And so that's one of the other changes here.
Okay, something else I was wondering about, if the city has any, how do you count tandem parking? I mean, normally I would think when you require parking spaces that they're all available for people to come and go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the tandem, I mean, I would love to have that in my house. The front would be a great workspace, but, you know, it's not really convenient for pulling the front car in and out. So do both of them count?
So the answer is yes. They both count under our code, and tandem parking situations are specifically, there's an exhibit in our zoning ordinance that identifies tandem as one option. My own house, I have tandem parking, and so I will admit it's not the most convenient, but it's sometimes it's a question of how do you do that efficiently? How do you get the density that's required by the code while still meeting parking? Now, in this case, the project has more parking than is required, so it's essentially excess parking beyond what the code requires. So you know, they could be proposing it to you with less parking, with only a single stall. Essentially, it adds more space for them to choose to use. They can park a car in there, or they could, in that extra space, they could use it for storage.
Yeah.
Right,
And the tandem parking provides 16 more spaces within the 16 residential units. Even if you were to remove that to single car parking, you still meet the parking requirements.
Right, I saw that, so. And just one other, and I was just a little confused by something. I think it said something like there's 0.93 people on average per unit. I didn't know how you can have less than a person in a house.
Do you know
I'm
what
not sure what
section that?
page
I
that
don't remember
was.
what page
My
that was,
guess,
but I
just typically when we see that, that's usually an average figured out from studies showing what it is across a larger number. You divide it and you get 0.93, and it's just
Well,
the
I figured
factor
that,
you
but you'd think
use.
you'd get the-
It's not that you really expect
It's the same
0.93
thing
of a
that
person there.
you'll
It's just
see in
on
the household.
average.
They'll sometimes in certain cities, based
2.5.
on the demographics, they'll say there's 2 adults and 1.5 children.
Yeah, but it's usually more than one.
No, 1.5, right. So,
Okay, yeah.
And where we commonly see that is in student generation factors. You'll see, for example, 0.42 students for elementary schools are generated,
No, I
you know,
understand.
hypothetically. So it's an averaging
I just thought
figure.
it was sort of funny. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Branch, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of, and getting back to the parking situation, will there be parking allowed on the street, on Pittman, or, you know, some areas they have no parking? Is this,
I'm going to peek out to James here. I believe there's parking allowed on Link Road currently. Yes, there is parking allowed on
Okay.
Link Road.
okay. The other question that I have, are there any future plans to address the traffic situation in that area? It's bad, and it could get worse with more residents in the area. I'd just like to know if there's any plans of improving a especially at the end where you have the stop signs and all that area.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I'll
a
give you
congested
a
area.
generalized answer for this area in that traffic improvements are required where traffic studies show that such improvements are warranted. And so our traffic engineer reviews the traffic studies to determine what improvements are needed to meet the standards adopted by the city. With this project, I'm not aware of any that are mandated, that the 25 units trigger additional improvements. What I will say, and we can talk about this when we get into a discussion on the 680 interchange, is that there will be major changes out in this area when 680 is realigned, and how we treat the former right-of-way then would have been the former right-of-way for 680 where it runs through here, and how that affects the various roads out there. Now, that's a longer-term improvement, but that's the one big change that you'll see out here over time, is that where you have 680 right now, that won't be the freeway anymore, and that'll become a local street.
Okay. All right, that's all.
Commissioner Wesley.
Maylee, you mentioned there was a discussion with PG&E. What was the discussion about? Why was there an additional discussion in reference to some pipeline there?
And I'll let Trent correct me if I'm wrong, but he is the applicant. I believe that De Novo was just trying to confirm that they were placing their buildings appropriately in regards to where the easements were. They wanted to confirm the size of the easements and what setback they would have to maintain from them.
Yeah, it's a double checking with PG&E to make sure that as the plans are depicted, that they concur that those plans accurately show.
Just standard. It wasn't something in addition. We do that with any construction site.
Yeah, and
so
we
that's
route these
what we're
plans
talking
to
about.
PG&E, so they already had
Yeah.
copies of them, but they don't always respond.
Yes.
So in this case, where we know there's something we want to make sure, it's helpful to reach out to them and make sure that that's the
Yeah,
case.
because the easements on this site cut across it so prominently, as Dave said, we just wanted to verify with them that there would be no issues. And it was an item at the neighborhood meeting as well.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Collins.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how many we have here, but there's a few that I referenced earlier, these notes from residents who are concerned about this. Pretty much every one of these talks about a major gas line going through this property. Can you address that?
Yeah, so there is an existing PG&E gas line that goes through the center of the project here. It actually continues through the existing residential neighborhoods to the northeast as well. And so that has an easement of about 10 feet, if that's correct. And so that was one of the items that was brought up during the neighborhood meeting, and why we had asked for confirmation from the applicant from PG&E stating that the buildings are proposed in the proper location and that gas line is currently operating safely. I actually have a copy of their correspondence if you'd like to see it.
Okay, and this gas line currently runs through other neighborhoods that are in existence out there?
It does, yeah. It doesn't span across just this parcel. It goes all the way through.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things, in addition to make sure that the buildings are located properly, is ensuring that trees aren't planted in that gas line where you get the roots from those trees. And we work with PG&E to ensure that the planned tree plantings are species and things that aren't going to cause issues for that, and that they're located properly. PG&E has actually taken a much greater look at tree planting over the years. Trees were planted as a part of developments where PG&E simply didn't respond back to the city to tell us, nope, you shouldn't be planting trees in those locations. And
It's called San Bruno.
Yeah, and so they've gone through, and as the owners of the ranch should be aware, and I've worked with the Ranch Homeowners Association, PG&E's actually come through the ranch subdivision and removed trees that were in that gas line in their neighborhood to help ensure that that gas line's integrity is maintained.
Okay, thank you. And then relative to the height of these buildings, these units, as compared to other units, and obviously they're going to be higher than the houses in the area. When I drive by there, to me, the next tallest building is going to be I think it's Hampton Inn out there.
So north of the site, Pittman Road is all your commercial buildings, and within the commercial zoning, you are permitted up to 45 feet in height. So you should see some comparable building heights. I couldn't tell you exactly what the very next building height is, but
There's a 3-story apartment complex out there on Pittman, right? Currently.
Yeah, the Bridgeport Ranch.
Ranch
yeah,
is
which
further
is,
down.
Yeah, which
Pittman.
is
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right. I have a speaker card from the applicant, Trent Sanson of DeNova Homes.
Yeah, of course.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow members of the Planning Commission. My name is Trent Sanson. I'm here on behalf of DeNova Homes this evening. First off, I just want to say thank you all very much for your time and consideration this evening. As Maylee mentioned, we've been very diligent in doing our best to work with city staff, feeding neighborhood impact, receiving neighborhood feedback and feedback from PG&E throughout the past almost 3 years now. So we're very excited to have this opportunity to be before you here this evening. Maylee did such a good job going through her staff report and presentation that I will do my best to condense this as best I can. We have a bit of a 3D video here at the end to try to help illustrate and paint the picture of the proposed units, being that, as it's mentioned, the live-work units and the height of these style units are a bit different for the city of Fairfield, considering it hasn't necessarily been done before in this part of town, or I don't believe in other parts of town as well. So I will do my best to get through what I have for you there we go. Just in case there's any new planning commissioners here and anybody in the audience, I just always like to go through a little bit about DeNova Homes and who we are. DeNova Homes was founded by my parents, Dave and Lori Sanson, almost 30 years ago now. We've been operating in the greater Bay Area and Fairfield now for, I believe, now over a decade. We're currently under construction out at Bradbury Park, just completed the Vines. We're breaking ground, or we're fully framed on our models out at Paradise 360 out in Paradise Valley. We also entitled Verdant, which Spanos companies bought from us and built. So we have a long history here in the city of Fairfield. Back in 2004, my parents were the builder captains with DeNova Homes on the Extreme Makeover Home Edition for the Sears family in Martinez, where we completed a home in 4.5 days for that family in need. And as a result of that, really inspired our motto, building a better community, where we really strive to go into the communities that we work, develop, and build our communities in, and try to make it a better place when we leave before it was when we got there. So as a result of that, my parents and DeNova Homes have been awarded the BIA Builder of the Year, the Bay Area BIA, in 2012. And again, in 2014, they were awarded the California Home Building Foundation Hall of Fame. They were inducted into that Hall of Fame. In 2015, in Pleasanton, we received the BIA Community of the Year, another testament to our commitment to craftsmanship and high-quality development. And then continuing the motto of building a better community, they received the Hearthstone Builder Humanitarian Award from Builders Magazine, where they received a $150,000 donation to then give to Homemade, where we've also been a long supporter of Homemade Northern California, where I do understand might be some negative controversy over this project in town these days. But when Mission Solano was trying to break ground on their Bridge to Life Center, we stepped up as the builder captain with Homemade several years ago to try to get that built. So we definitely are trying to do our best to contribute to the communities we work and develop in. There we go. Tonight here this evening, I have our design and project team here in case there's any questions I cannot answer for you. We have Robert and Calvin with William Hesmalch Architects, Kareem and Yoonji here with Meridian Associates, our civil engineers. Steve Abrams, our traffic engineer, is here as well this evening because we understood that the city traffic engineer was not going to be here, so we wanted to make sure he is here to help you answer any of the traffic-related questions that might come up. And Phil Vandertulen of Vandertulen Associates is here as well to help answer any landscape questions. So we talked a little bit about the history and the design. Maylee went through the location and the zoning, so I'll just skip these. But this was our very first site plan back in 2015, where we were contemplating full condominiums on the site. We were initially at 41 total units, met with city staff. We all came up with and determined that this was just too dense for the site, didn't fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. So we progressed from there to then our initial townhome concept for the site, where we were down to 29 units from the initial 41. And then progressed to, after all these further refinements and looking at the PG&E easements and continuing to work with city staff and developing the proposed plans that are in front of you this evening, down to 28 units. And then again, further refinement with PG&E, verifying the widths and our setbacks. The gas line down the middle is a 10-foot easement, and we've confirmed with PG&E they would like 5 feet away from it from all building corners. So we've established that as well and been able to confirm that, and we'll make sure that is also satisfied with future construction drawings pending all of your decision this evening. So that took it down to 27 units. And then based on the neighborhood feedback we got on April earlier this year, where we were reviewing this proposed project and a project that we have also since withdrawn our application on further down Pittman Road, formerly known as Chantilly. We made sure that we were definitely taking everything into account. The neighborhood said we want to see something different, so we reduced it to 25 units to try to lessen the density and the intensity in the neighborhood, make sure all easements are fully accounted for with PG&E and setbacks are all fully honored, and then making sure that the commercial component is in line with the mixed-use live-work units along Pittman Road. And Maylee already went through all the architecture, so I will just jump into our 3D video for you all that Robert and Calvin's team at William Has Mulch Architects prepared, and hopefully it helps paint the picture a little bit more of what we're presenting this evening. If I can get a computer to work. There we go. That is the interior open space and community congregation area. We understand staff's concerns with the gates. Minor disclaimer, trees won't look like that when they're immediately planted. Those are about 10-year establishment fill. So with that, I can learn to drive. I thank you very much for all of your time and consideration this evening. Myself and my team are here to help answer any questions you all may have, and we're also here to help answer any questions or concerns from the public as well. So we'll be available as you all need. Thank you.
Any questions from commissioners? Nope. Okay. Well, I will now, thank you. Now open the public hearing. First speaker card I have is from Nora Dizon, or Dizon. Why don't you step over to that one? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm really surprised at the idea that the community had any agreement with this development. When this was proposed back in April, we soundly rejected it. And this is almost identical, except that it just has the office spaces added now to it. There are reasons, like you said, the PG&E line. But really, the biggest problem is the traffic issues. The problems are so bad that parents driving their children to school, to Cordelia Hills Elementary or other schools in Cordelia, are taking Bridgeport Avenue, a very small road, to get onto Ramsey, get onto Gold Hill, and get their kids to school. You cannot take a left into Bridgeport. That's illegal. So they make a U-turn, they go drive up further, make a U-turn, and make a right. I feel very bad for the residents of Bridgeport. Their sleepy road used to be, you know, I mean, now it's a thoroughfare. And I feel very bad for the residents of the ranch. They are stuck in this situation, in my opinion, because of very bad planning in the past. There was no acceptance of any additional residential because there is such a grave need for a fix for this problem. Some of the residents of Bridgeport have even said that they've been having difficulty backing out of their driveways. Near misses, lots of, near miss collisions. And even some have said even their pets, have just been run over. No children yet, thank God. But why are we waiting? And why are we considering anything that would aggravate the situation any more than it is? The people who are living there now, they're stuck in this horrible situation. Bridgeport against ranch, ranch against Bridgeport. Ranch residents think, well, why do these people have a right to stop us from the use of the road? And they're just trying to get their kids to school. And then in Bridgeport, they had a sleepy, quiet street before. They're at each other, but really, they should be blaming the previous planning commission that allowed that to go through. Because that situation was created, and there's always this tension. There really needs to be a fix. Nothing against Denova. Would have been any builders the same reaction. There just needs to be a fix. These people should have a safe place to live, a safe way to get their kids to school. There just has to be a solution. There's no way that the community supports this in any way, shape, or form. Fire chief has also written a letter, and one of the next speakers will read his letter. Thank you very much for listening to me.
All right, thank you. The next speaker is Glenn Gartley.
Solano County resident since the mid-'70s when we moved here from Sacramento area. Resident of Bridgeport Avenue since 1988. Population's increased. It's going to keep increasing. What we need addressed is the infrastructure. Traffic is the number one. Again, nothing against the home builders or anything like that. We know the houses are going to be built. That's going to happen. The infrastructure has to be addressed. Traffic is the biggest problem. I have literally thousands of cars going past my home, commute hours morning and evening. Backing out of my driveway one time, I had people cut through my yard. I've had people pass me on Bridgeport doing 25 miles an hour, and they try and get past. Every morning you can hear people, as soon as they come around the corner, they're full throttle, heading down Bridgeport. Traffic's got to be addressed. Fix that problem before you add more to it. Understand, houses are going to be built, but what are we going to do about this traffic? You're talking about 680 interchange is going to change drastically, and that whole area out there has been neglected. Fairfield, Susoon, keeps building, keeps building. All this traffic gets dumped out our way. We got to fix it. Something's got to be done about the roads. The water runoff. It was one of the things that was discussed back in the April meeting. Where's all this water go? And detention systems were talked about, and there's no detention system in this. So where does that water go? Because these all used to be farm fields, and the water would sit and soak into the ground. It all goes into the ditches now. My house floods almost every year. I have two houses on my property, and one of them had 4 inches of mud in it a couple years ago. and it gets worse and worse the more you allow buildings to be built. The project out on, in Maxwell Court or whatever, at least that's just gravel. If they put a building there, I guarantee they're gonna raise the building, all that water runoff's gonna go into the ditches and go down towards, Old Cordelia. Trash. Go take a walk down West Cordelia Road and look how much trash is out there because all those people that park those trucks and sit there all day long and dump their piss bottles and their old coffee pots and diapers and everything else. It's disgusting. You did bring up a good question. Who takes care of this stuff? And then one person said, oh, we have a contract in place for this business to do this. What happens when that business goes out of business and leaves all that trash or leaves whatever weeds or whatever, and there's no longer a program for taking care of it? So what's going to be done about all the trash that comes along with all this extra use? One thing I'd like you to consider when you do start talking about roads, the 20-plus years that I was in the military and away from here, I was in Washington for a little bit, and they're using a lot more roundabouts than they do traffic lights. It's a much better system. So keep that in mind, too, when you try to figure out what you're going to do about the traffic out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is George Gwynn. Okay.
Good evening once again. I'd like to say ditto to Ms. DeZone's comments and also read a letter from the Cordelia Fire Protection District Fire Chief.
We have a copy of that letter.
Okay, but I'd still like to read it, though.
Well, I don't need it read to me. I can read.
But I understand, but the public might like to hear it. So anyway, to Planning Commission regarding Astaire development, I'm the fire chief for the Cordelia Fire Protection District on 2155 Cordelia Road. I've looked at the traffic study that's been included with the staff report for this project. I have some concerns about it. The study shows the project would not significantly impact the level of services. My concerns are with the intersection of Cordelia Road at Bridgeport at Lopes, and Cordelia Road at Lopes. There's already significant traffic issues with these locations during the morning commute for students going to all the schools off of Lopes Road, as well as when school is released. Individuals driving on Cordelia Road in the morning make legal turns, left turns onto Bridgeport every day. Create traffic jam zones for sport that impacts the local residents being able to leave their own homes in the morning, as well as speed along Bridgeport. The traffic impacts Cordelia Road and has at times delayed the response of fire apparatus because of traffic jams at Lopes. Individuals that use Lopes do not understand how the 5 different stop signs are to be used. Cross traffic on Lopes will not allow the traffic on Bridgeport and Cordelia Road, giving them the ability to enter the traffic lane. If this project is approved, there are major changes that need to be done to these intersections to help ease congestion and allow the residents, as well as the fire department, the ability to traverse these roads during normal business hours as well as during emergencies. No disrespect for the developer, but this is something that needs to be addressed. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I have one more speaker card, Alejandro Oseguera.
Good afternoon, everyone. On another note about the project, I do want to comment and say I think it's a wonderful project, and I was not aware of how much traffic was going on within the area. But however, I would say if traffic is a problem, to probably relocate the project, because I think it's really amazing, and I would like to see it within the our community. I would make a tremendous impact, I believe, and I would just like to suggest that the staff rethinks the idea about having a gated area, because it would help the residents have a level of safety when they do live within the area, to prevent crime. For example, like someone robbing someone's house. It would be easy for them to get away with like their belongings if there's no gate available within the project. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other speaker cards. Does anybody else like to speak on this? I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Walker.
Just a couple of things. I'm a longtime guy here, and we've been dealing with this Bridgeport thing a long time. And I'm going to give you the same suggestion that I gave Solano County before. Go down to the end of Bridgeport before it hits the frontage road and put a cul-de-sac at the end of there. And that way that will solve all of that problem. I've told them that before. That's a Solano County issue. That's not a City of Fairfield issue. As far as the traffic concerns that you're all mentioning, I agree with them 100%. This Interstate 80 and 680 interchange should have been done a long time ago. All those things that should have been taken out, but that's beyond our control. And that's Mr. Garamendi, and that's Mrs. Feinstein, and now Kamala Harris. And we can't make them budge anymore. And you have to get on them, because they're the people that are going to supply the money to make that happen. I mean, Solano County has been put on the bottom of the list for freeways and stuff for a long time, because we haven't had, our representation has always been broken up. So I want to see that happen, and those people have to make it happen for what's happening. So I agree with you, and like I said, that's the one solution. Back. You know, I hate to tell you, but I'm 63 years old and a lifetime resident. I do not believe in my lifetime I will see it. I hate to tell you that, but that's just my firm belief. And until pressure is put on to those representatives who can supply the money and put it together, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And there's more traffic going through that interchange than just about anywhere else in the Bay Area. So I don't know why it's not a priority, but maybe one of these days when one of those representatives gets stuck in traffic there, maybe it will wake them up. It seems like that's the only thing that happens.
And we'll report back to you on some of those details, but to be clear, some of the work on the interchange has already begun. You've seen a number of
but not the
construction
major
components.
issue that we're talking
Correct,
about.
yeah.
Because
We'll walk
you have the railroad crossing, Cordelia Road, Lopes Road, all that problem and congestion. And I feel, I do feel for the people of the Bridgeport place. There's a kind of a living in society there and country place and stuff, but with them not addressing those other traffic problems have put them onto you. But hopefully you can get the county to address that cul-de-sac at the end, and that will stop all the problems, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer, which the engineer from the city of Fairfield will tell you. But that's my belief in that part. But on this project, I just have to say to you that I hope it's all going to be. I agree with it if it's all fenced. I don't agree with staff on the gate, but I'm going to glint to that because you have more educated people. But I will. I want to make sure that you understand this: that the residents have a right to come back and apply if they find that there's a problem.
That is absolutely correct.
My concern about this project and its zoning is the potential for the type of commercial uses that could go in here. I've experienced this 2 times now. Once on North Texas Street and Interstate 80, or by Manual Campus Boulevard there, where it was zoned commercial, and the residents actually decided that they wanted apartments there because of what that commercial would have done to their residential neighborhood. They would have heard things like, good morning, this is McDonald's, may I take your order? Or whatever, and you'll hear it over the loudspeakers of the cars drive through. We had the same issue with the commercial area on Red Top Road, where a lot of the residents came in, were concerned about the apartments going there, but when they realized that commercial that could have gone in there, and they would have heard the same kind of thing until 2 o'clock in the morning, they also then seemed like, at least to me when I was here, that was the right way to go. What I like about this project is it gives a good buffer between the commercial and the residential. It has a little commercial, has the residential, and it gives you this buffer between the two and mixes much better into the neighborhood than if you were to have the commercial. And I think if you put commercial in here, the amount of traffic, which is allowed, by the way, to go in, that's why I asked the question earlier, that the amount of traffic going in and out of here would be much more worse than what you have here with the residential project. That's just my uneducated opinion. So I like the project. I think it mixes well within the neighborhood. It doesn't address these regional traffic problems that have to be answered. And I don't want those of you here that are concerned about that, don't believe that I don't want to speak for my fellow commissioners, that I don't realize, because I was on the council in the 80s and we were working on these issues. So this is not new to me. It's frustrating to me, but it's not new. But this project is a good project. I like it. I like the way that it fits into the neighborhood, and I think it will be an asset.
Other comments? No other comments? Do I have a motion?
Question.
Oh, you do have, okay.
I just have a question regarding the commercial use. Is there anything that prohibits them from turning the 150 square feet into the entire unit being utilized as commercial and having 7 employees, 10 employees coming and working out of that?
I'm sorry, turning the entire unit into commercial? Or
Let's say I go and I buy one of these condominiums and I want to use the 150 square foot, but I'm a beauty salon and I want to have 10 chairs, so I'm going to take the second floor of my unit and turn it into a place where they can also do hair and come upstairs and do that as well. What's going to prohibit that from happening?
Yeah, so the way that gets prohibited is the building's going to be built to certain aspects of the building code. The lower portions are built where that's an allowable activity. The occupants have to get a business license to occupy that space. And so that's one of the checks that we have on how are you using this space? What's the business? If they were to be using the residential portion as a commercial business, to commercial standards, multiple employees, it's a different kind of occupancy, and so that's not allowed by the building code.
The only policing mechanism of that is either the neighbor tells on them or they go through the process where they apply for a business license. Well, that's one. I mean, there's
right. Various ways the city can come to learn about it, but
right.
Yes, it wouldn't be allowed in the residentially constructed portions of that house.
And you had indicated on the gate that I liked Gary's idea of them having the opportunity to have the gate, and I think that it would be more value to the property if there were a gate there. I would assume that if I wanted to purchase a unit in that place, I would want the gate. And if I were going to use that for business, I would think that the association that goes with that would be able to decide that they have it open at 6 in the morning and close at 8 o'clock at night, much similar to how they do in Rancho, although there's no commercial up there, and allow for that, because the protection overnight and outside of those hours would be, I think, well worth it. So what would be you say the monitoring, but wouldn't the association and the community bear that cost of ensuring that monitoring and that's taken care of?
Well, they would bear the cost. Under the city's code, as a commercial site where the spaces are required to be available for the commercial users, if it's not done properly, you could have commercial visitors to this site. If for whatever reason the gate isn't opened as it's supposed to be, they don't have a place to park. So it is a question of, do you trust them? Do you put conditions in the use permit that obligate it? But again, it becomes a monitoring and just one more potential area where you could have issues. Staff's recommendation was one way to ensure that you don't have those issues.
Do you trust them to clean the retention basin?
I think I have a different...
We do have a check on that, in that there's an obligation for a maintenance agreement, and if they don't, the city will come in if we identify that. But again, it's a reason why we recommend
I think the
it.
opinion I have on that would be that, again, if I put myself in the place of the potential owner, occupant, and wanting to use a space, I mean, I think it's safe to assume that at 150 square foot, which is the size of your bedroom, that you're going to have a desk and a couple of chairs, and you're going to be doing legal, CPA, counseling, something very low-key, something that's not going to require traffic coming in and out throughout the day over and over again repeatedly. And I would make that decision if I were a business owner, say to myself, well, I want the secure security there, but I want the convenience of having a nice off-site or perhaps a better write-off to have my office space downstairs. And I think that's probably where the use of that's going to really be. And that's where we see a lot of live work. And even if you go down to Sassoon Waterfront, you see a lot of that. A lot of that space is not really, it's commercial, but it's not retail. Right. You know, you're not shopping in and out of there. You're not coming out at 10 o'clock at night. You're meeting with clients. And I see that that would be a beneficial asset to it. So I would be in favor of putting the gate in there, and I would like the fellow commissioners to consider that, because I think that that was the original plan, and I think it adds value and opportunity. I don't disagree with the residents having to come back, but we saw what happened up at
Up on Rolling Hills.
Rolling Hills, where a couple of people wanted to ride their bikes through and not be inhibited by their gates. And so I think that doing it right the first time is probably smart.
They pay for.
Yes.
Streets, lights, everything.
Right. So, other than that, I think you've done a great job of building something unique, aesthetically pleasing there. I completely agree with Gary. The traffic is, that's one of the worst areas for traffic across the board on every level when it comes to school time and out of school time. I had an office on 455 Lopes Road for quite a few years, and it was just a given. You don't go at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you don't leave at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You have to wait for all the traffic to ease up. And it's getting worse now as we're getting back to the recessionary period where traffic was congested the way it was now. Anytime you're going pretty much north on or east on the 80, it's pretty congested, and 680 is bad. So I don't see a resolution to that at all, but I hate to prohibit something this good that is, as Gary indicated as well, a good transition piece between what's going on out there from a retail, from a fast food, to a single home family, to the Bridgeport apartments. I think this is a good bridge between those, and it's a good use of that space. So,
And I just wanted to make a quick note about the gate. As the conditions of approval are written, it prohibits the gate as currently proposed. The the conditional use permit has language that's a little more flexible. It states that if a gate in the future were to be proposed, it just has to be designed so that it doesn't prohibit parking for the commercial units. So I don't know if that kind of helps towards what you guys are speaking about, but just so you're aware, we didn't outright prohibit gates at all. We just we recommended to oppose what is currently proposed, and then we leave some room for in the future if there are gates proposed.
I think as a commission, we can recommend that the gate be allowed, right?
Yes.
And I only say that because I understand the concerns from a commercial, but I just don't see this as a normal commercial development in that sense where that would be an issue. And I think that I'm more in favor of allowing the gates given those conditions than not.
Yeah, I'll put one caveat to that. Because this was moving forward with a recommendation that the gate not be constructed in this particular location, I cannot guarantee that its design here has been fully vetted by the city's traffic engineer. That if you do go down a path of saying that you want it, that it be conditioned to be to meet the satisfaction of the city's traffic engineer. It looks on its face like it has the basic characteristics. One of the key things is that the traffic engineer does not want cars coming to that gate, getting blocked, and then having to back out into the street. You want to make sure that you've got a way that they can turn around. It appears...
Maybe right here.
Yeah, and it appears that it meets that, but if you go that route, I would put the caveat that it be to the satisfaction of the traffic engineer.
So this matches the Paradise Alley, which was approved by.
Yeah.
Does the code say when commercial areas have to be open for public access? I mean, how are we going to tell what times are we going to have when it's open and closed?
It doesn't, but it also doesn't restrict the hours that customers could be coming to you could have shop in the evening, could be, you don't have limitations. So conceivably, at 9 o'clock at night, you could have somebody coming for an appointment.
Commercial is on the front facing on Pittman Road.
Yeah.
It's not on the inside. That's why I asked the question about the units on the inside. So even at nighttime, they have access.
Yes. Yeah. So it is available for you to consider if you disagree with that.
But theoretically, somebody could operate their business 24 hours a day on the ground floor. I mean, it doesn't sound like that's the type of business that it's designed for, but
They're
theoretically
not
they
designed
could.
for that, but theoretically, yeah. If you're an attorney, you could have a 2 a.m. appointment. If that becomes a problem, the association can restrict that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, other comments? Commissioner
Couple of
Wesley.
things. First of all, point of information, per Commissioner Walker, and it sounds like I'm hearing our only option is county money and federal money to do any modifications in terms of streets, roundabouts, cul-de-sacs, or anything like that. And I'm a newer commissioner, so is that, first of all, the point of information I have to agree with or understand that to be fact?
Yeah, the way it works is there's various funding sources for roadway improvements, and the city has access to certain funds, but typically the way it works is unless it's a part of a major capital improvement that's identified by the city on our capital improvements program for our city traffic impact funding programs, that such improvements are made where a traffic study for a particular development identifies that certain improvements are warranted. For a project like this, that's a very teeny tiny project, it doesn't rise to the level of triggering those warrants. But the city does have funding sources. Whether, I don't believe Bridgeport, closing off Bridgeport, which is a county road, it's outside the city. It's certainly not something that's identified as a city-funded project.
Got it.
So that would be a county-funded project.
Understood.
Unless
And
the-
prior
Could I add something? Could I add
You
something
sure
to
can.
that, just for
Which
information?
isn't identified that way.
The major traffic issues in this area are caused by the interstates, of which we have no control over. They're controlled by the state.
Well,
and
I'll
the
give you
federal
part of
government.
that. Part of that is also controlled by the neighborhoods and the planning in the neighborhoods, but a major part of it is that, I agree, but I wouldn't say that's the entire thing.
What I was trying to, I think the point is that we can control our streets. We can control that they meet stop signs, widths, and all those kind of things. But when you have so much traffic dropping off the freeway onto those streets, that's the problem.
I agree. I agree that's a huge part of the problem.
And we
But I
can't-
just wanted clarity around what do we do, and if we have zero funds to address it in terms of the street level, what other options do we have? Do we go to developers and say part of this plan is you give a certain amount to build a roundabout or to build a cul-de-sac, right? I don't know. But that would be something I would look at because that sounds like a major problem. And I live in town and I see it. It is a major problem. Second thing,
Just
I
to
believe Glenn mentioned a point, and I'll give this to you, then you can do your whole deal, about water. And he mentioned one of his places floods yearly or whatever, right? So we have to have the runoff. We have to have those types of things. We haven't talked about that. Is that an issue that we've looked at as staff?
This particular project does have stormwater treatment areas, and it's been engineered and designed for the runoff to go into those locations. So as it's currently designed, it meets all of the city and state criteria. James Pollock, our engineer, could go a little further into depth if you have more.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more of that. But
Sure.
David, I want you to respond to the other piece if you would.
Sure, getting back to like the roundabout question. Those kinds of improvements can be required to be made by a project like this, where
Right.
the traffic study demonstrates that this project is what's triggering the need for that. Then you can clearly say there's a clear nexus, this project is triggering the need, then you can make them do that. What we do require with this project is that they contribute, every one of these units pays into a fund that the city has to make larger traffic improvements. Sometimes these little projects, individually they don't contribute,
Right.
but at a larger level they do. And so we have a larger pot of money that each of these developments pays into to fund larger improvements that the city's identified are needed over the long term. I don't, off the top of my head, know whether any individual road improvement out in this area is on that list. But there are major improvements that this will be helping to contribute for the long term for this area.
Could we then, as a commission,
And they're required
ask,
to pay that as part of
ask not the developer in this particular case, but could we ask council to address the traffic concerns in that area as to assess whether or not it is a higher priority than others, and perhaps get some of those funds allocated to address the traffic concerns in that area? I mean, is that within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to ask the city to do that? Because you're saying that there's that fund, which we're aware of, and at some point there's people who decide where that money gets spent and what roads get improved and what happens, and we can only control what we can control. But if we can control that, this certainly, in my opinion, is one of the worst trafficked areas in the area and should get some attention, albeit it borders the county as well, so we have struggles there.
Yeah, the commission can certainly do that. One of the appropriate potential points where you might want to do that is after you hear from staff the longer-term plans with the interchange, 680, and how that fits with the larger collection of improvements out in this area.
And also I think to help with one of the things that you were concerned about is one of the issues has always been Green Valley Creek. And Green Valley Creek has always been an issue. Now we've addressed a little bit of it up by the library, the Cordelia Library up in that area. They've addressed it with some retention ponds and so forth. But there's also been some issues about all in the county area. And I know that Supervisor Brown has been really on top of this issue on trying to find out why they can't get issues done on Green Valley Creek, which I'm sure is the major issue that comes down into the area that this gentleman is talking about. There is some funding for those, the same kind of thing that has been going on, and that funding, it seems like, I can't tell you for sure, but and talking to Supervisor Brown, that has not been used on Green Valley Creek. So I know that Supervisor Brown is really on top of that issue right now, about how they can address Green Valley Creek and how it feeds down into the area of the Bridgeport or the old Cordelia area. But again, that's not in our privy, except in the area where it's in the city of Fairfield, where we need to make sure we address anything that happens over there, address that plan on what they're going to do with Green Valley Creek and how we can add to the stability of that and where it dumps down. And this project doesn't do that, but across the street from this, anything that goes in over there is going to address Green Valley Creek.
Any other comments? Commissioner Branch? Oh. Okay.
Yeah, good evening again. James Pollock, Public Works Engineering. I'll try to answer the question the best that I can. The City of Fairfield, along with 76 other agencies, we have a stormwater quality permit with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. As part of that permit, we are required to treat all runoff that leaves the site as part of this project, as long as the other projects you heard tonight are required to put in stormwater quality treatment measures, which treats the water before it leaves the site. The typical method is to do bioretention. As part of the bioretention, it does have some amount of detention aspects of it. And so there will be, some detention associated with this project. Because of its proximity to Dan Wilson Creek, which is where this project drains, oftentimes you want to look at where it is within the watershed as far as whether or not it is beneficial to detain or if it actually could be a hindrance. If it's farther enough down in the watershed, if you detain too much, then you'll have a coincident peak with the larger water that comes down, so in essence you could be exacerbating the problem. So detention is not necessarily the fix-all, and sometimes it could actually hurt the overall area. So.
Right. Well, I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just saying, what do we do if that's an issue? So your answer in terms of what we've done in this project is?
We are requiring it per our permit to have them put in bioretention as part of their low-impact development for stormwater quality treatment. And as part of that bioretention, there was some detention aspect of it.
And you feel that will address the issue?
That will address the issue for this site. Will it address it as a regional level? No. I do want to say, though, across my desk, it's probably been a couple of weeks ago, I got a report from the Solano County Water Agency, which in essence is taking the lead in doing a H&H analysis, a hydraulic and hydrologic analysis of this overall regional area. And what is the flooding source? Where is it coming from? Are there any potential fixes to that? And they're just starting that project off. They're hired a firm, I don't remember what firm it is that they hired, but to look at this overall area, which will take care of Cordelia Road, Bridgeport area, and the slough area, for lack of better terms, in general.
Thank you.
Okay. As far there's been a lot of talk about traffic and congestion out there. One of the requirements for this project is we are requiring them to pay into a traffic signal cost share for signalization of intersections such as Pittman and, Pittman and Cordelia, and also Pittman and Link. Those two intersections will be signalized in the future. Mr. Feinstein talked about the capital improvement program. And those are the two intersections among others that are a part of that program. When will they be signalized? It depends on traffic warrants and the studies that will need to be done. But as part of this project, they're paying into a traffic signal cost share fund, in essence, to pay for their fair share of these signal improvements. Okay? Sure.
Any other commissioners?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I think this project is really a great project for this area. It's well needed for many reasons. But I must commend Nova and the staff had worked together to make this come to fruition. Yes, there's situations. Do we live in a perfect world? No. Any project, there's going to be obstacles. The thing is how we work through the obstacles. And I think that what I've been hearing, there is things in motion that will help move this project along. I can't see, and this is my opinion, I can't see the traffic issue being a reason not to go forward with this project. The other thing I like to mention about this project is we need housing in this area. It's going to be affordable housing, hopefully. We really need this. So, and the area, what else can we put in that area? Manufacturing, warehouse.
McDonald's, have a McDonald's.
A McDonald's? No. So the bottom line is I would like to really like to have the staff, I'd like the staff to reconsider the gate. That's, to me, that's a big thing. I currently live in a condo, and we don't have a gate, and we have problems. So I think a gate would be really something that would be helpful to me. So I really think it's a great project. Okay.
Well, I think it's up to us whether we want to require a gate or not. So any other comments?
The only thing I would say before you ask for a motion is maybe we should poll the gate issue so that we don't have to try to include it after the motion.
Or somebody can make a motion with or without the gate. It sounds like the consensus is for a gate, but what are commissioners' thoughts on that?
I would make the motion to approve the project and include the gate meeting traffic engineers' requirements.
Okay, and are there any time restrictions on when the gate is open or not as part of your motion?
Can we ask the developer if that's okay with you? I just want to make sure that, because if there's a delay in that, okay, cool.
I'm not sure whether we can tell them when to open or to not open it, but I mean, that would be to me, that would be an issue with the homeowners association on that.
The project comes with a use permit, and the residential component is really only approvable with a use permit through which you can make conditions or add conditions.
Do you want us to add them, or do you want staff to add them?
I think we need to add them.
The commission should
So
identify the hours that you want to see that gate open. Normal
So
business hours identified.
I would add I would motion for the approval with the gate under the use conditions that the gate is open under normal business hours.
Okay.
Is that clear enough?
I'm not sure if it is. Is that 9 o'clock? Is that 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock? Is it like 7 a.m. to
By calling it
8
normal
a.m. to-
business hours, the homeowners can make the decision.
Okay. It's your condition.
I usually think that normal business hours are probably 9 to 5. I think for clarity, that would probably be a good.
Can I ask
Good
the
time.
city attorney what her recommendation on that is? Putting an hour restriction of normal business hours with that language?
I don't know that there's a correct legal answer on this. It's up
Yeah,
to the
it's-
discretion.
I
of the
think it's
commission.
really a policy
That's one
decision,
lawyer
not a
talking
legal
to another.
question.
I just think you're opening yourself for potential.
I agree with Gary
One
that we should leave
recommendation.
as much of it as we can to those who own those units and can collectively make that decision amongst themselves rather than us putting the restrictions on them. So I think normal business hours allows them to define what that's going to be for that community.
I agree. And let's say normal business hours as defined by the homeowners association.
Yeah.
That's the motion.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
The motion is to approve the project with including the gate with the normal business hours to be established by the homeowner association.
That meets all traffic requirements that they were.
And along that meets the traffic engineers.
Right.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, now it's time for the director's report. Any items for the director's report?
Yeah, I have 3 items to report back on. The first is at your last meeting, I had indicated that our train station, the train station that's being constructed in the northeast part of our city, was nearing completion, and I expected it was going to be opened in a fairly soon time frame. We did not expect that it would be open prior to this Planning Commission meeting, but within a couple of days after your last meeting, the Capitol Corridor said, we are ready to stop. So that station opened a couple of weeks ago. Strongly encourage you to go out there. You can drive onto the site, you can walk up onto the platform, take the train. Just a fantastic addition to our northeast area that will be a real catalyst for development of a really nice transit-oriented portion of our city out in the northeast area. Second item, and some of our other commissioners may report back on this as well. A couple weekends ago, staff and several of the commissioners, Commissioner Pattis and Commissioner Wesley, attended Planning Commissioners Conference over at Sonoma State. It was an excellent morning of discussion of various planning issues, including cannabis, which you have heard quite a bit about, and I think you will continue to hear as state law and the market evolve on that, as well as a collection of housing issues. So some of those commissioners may report back on that as well. Speaking of housing, and I heard from Commissioner Branch encouragement for housing in this area, and at your last meeting, Commissioner Walker asked that the issue of affordable housing and obligations under our zoning ordinance, that there be mandates for affordability on medium density, that issue be brought back to the commission for further discussion. What I want to report back to you is that this is an issue of importance to the city, and the city manager's office has asked to set a study session with the Planning Commission and the City Council on not just that issue, but a wide range of housing issues. And one of the real impetuses for this is that there is a very large package. I think it was 15 separate housing bills that were passed by the state earlier this year. And it's going to have some major implications for housing in this city, but then it ties back to the question of what is the appropriate way to provide affordable housing. We've also looked at issues of changing zoning designations on properties like the Rockville Springs property that the commission looked at last year. Large collection of issues all surrounding housing. So we're looking to hold a study session with the council and the Planning Commission jointly to present to you a collection of information, raise a collection of issues, seek some feedback from you all on these topics. Most likely March is looking like that's going to be, and so Cindy Spears on our administrative team is going to be reaching out to you over the next couple of weeks to gauge your availability and what your calendar might look like.
Where would that be held out here?
It would be held here, most likely. Not all study sessions are held here. Gets a little complicated. Question for the city manager's office and the
Bring your own.
Yeah.
I'll split it with you.
So I've seen study sessions in this room jointly. It gets a little crowded. I've also seen them in some of our other spaces. City manager's office will arrange that.
Well,
Typically, we look to see the Planning Commission. There'd be an equal footing in
It
that.
might be interesting, since it's a study session, that maybe we can do some sort of something in the Willow Hall,
Yeah,
where we can sit across from each other and have some back and forth discussion, because it's difficult to do it in this room.
Yeah, the issue with Willow Hall is the acoustics are really poor. We'll take that under advisement.
Or if there's some other
The city
facility.
manager's office will be arranging that, but I'll pass that
Some
on.
facility where we can sit across from each other and have some back and
Yeah.
forth discussion.
Yeah.
Would be really great.
So you can look for that coming up the next quarter, most likely.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right.
Yeah. 27th, we have no items for that meeting, so if you have plans for the holidays, it
You're free to go
says-
on vacation.
I'm not sure what date it's identified here that you're adjourning to, but at the moment, we have no items for that meeting, so you can expect that you won't have to come that night.
All right. Any information items from any commissioners?
Yeah, I have a question for David. Is there any movement on that hotel on Tabor Avenue, the one right off the corner of North Texas?
Yes, the project that you're referring to is what we refer to as 200 East Tabor. It's just east of North Texas Street.
Right.
Yeah, and it was either last year or earlier the year before, the city, there was a use permit for that property that allowed it to be operated, I believe, as a form of senior housing. I may have that wrong,
Yeah,
but
I heard something about that,
assisted living, that kind of thing. The operator was not a good operator at all, and the conditions in there were essentially unlivable. The city went through quite a bit of effort to revoke the permit for that operator, who was in there as a private entity. So the city has taken a fair amount of responsibility for that property, and our affordable housing division has arranged for an operator to come back in there to buy that property, to completely rehab it, to gut it, and to set it aside under city as the city watchdog to operate as permanent supportive housing, which is for it's a form of affordable housing for people with various issues and challenges. But the city essentially will serve as a watchdog in a way that with that previous project we didn't have that arrangement. But that whole building is going to be remodeled substantially and really brought up to current code, which it wasn't before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The Edge Church, the Ash Building, what's the happening?
I'm not aware of anything with the Edge Church. They haven't come to the planning division to ask any questions. I've heard that as a discussion about a possible someone moving into the Osh building, which was the 1500 Oliver site.
Mega weed import.
There, yeah. So two aspects of the use of that. One is the zoning for that property, which allows a church. Churches are permitted uses in commercial centers under our zoning. So from a zoning standpoint, moving a church in there is not a limitation. The church would have to improve that space and we were talking building occupancy earlier. My understanding is it's not designed from a building code standpoint for assembly type activities. So if from a zoning standpoint it's allowed, but there would have to be a number of improvements made to that site. The separate issue is if there are private CC&Rs among the owners of that center. Not certain of that, but the owners of the 1500 Oliver site would have to make sure that there are no CC&Rs that preclude them, or that their other owners would say, no, that use isn't allowed in this center. So it's the best I can tell you.
All right. Any other comments, questions?
I have one more item. Last meeting.
Attorney, speak.
Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioners McDonald and Walker asked a couple questions that I wanted to report back to you on. First, Commissioner McDonald, you asked with respect to the cannabis ordinance if about a landlord's potential liability if their tenant was cultivating cannabis and created a nuisance condition, and whether the landlord could be liable for that, and whether including a provision in the lease would help. The answer is yes, that adding a provision in the lease can help, but it's not a shield against liability. The city's nuisance code does require landlords or property owners to maintain their property without nuisance conditions. So if a code enforcement action was initiated and if the city sent a notice of abatement to the landlord, having that lease provision in there would give the landlord an extra tool to cure the nuisance and potentially evict their tenant. A general provision in the lease regarding nuisances may also be effective, but adding that in wouldn't hurt. Commissioner Walker, you asked whether there was a state law coming into effect in the next few years that would require all new residential buildings to have solar panels. And I haven't found, or there isn't a state law with that particular requirement. There is a goal that the state is working towards, that all new residential buildings be net zero energy by 2020. That's being implemented through the Building Standards Code. So that's updated in 3-year cycles. The current codes do require that new residential single-family homes in subdivisions with more than 10 residences and certain multifamily buildings be solar ready. So that requires that their roofs have space for solar panels and that they have locations identified for inverters and connections. And the new cycle, the codes will be issued, they'll be released in July of this year, and then they'll go into effect, or I guess of 2018. Then they'll go into effect January 1st, 2019. So we haven't heard any indication that those will include a requirement for PV, but we'll certainly let you know if that's the case.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, oh, one more thing. Okay. All right, thanks. Last call. All right, we're adjourned till January 10th.